we see this we see this rejoicing of the Ark of the Covenant being brought into the meeting tent where David had set up the place that he would later rise from his own bed and say, "How is it that I live in a house of cedar while the Lord is dwelling in a tent?" And there's this rejoicing throughout the city, but we have to recall that before this time, the ark was being lodged somewhere else because everybody was really afraid of it, right? The ark was being kept off at a distance from the kingdom of Jerusalem. It seemed to have been an ill omen to have it anywhere near, and so David left it at this guy's house. I can't remember his name. But seeing that the Lord blessed that fellow whose house the ark had been left at, David went to retrieve the ark. He's like, okay, clearly this is the Ark of the Covenant. The Lord is there. You know, he went and got it and brought it in. And there's this rejoicing at the approach of goodness, in this case, the Ark of the Covenant, but there's this rejoicing at the approach of God that is a transition in our mind the closer we get to the fullness of time and the conclusion of the history of salvation. For example, when Moses brought the people out of the land of Israel and he gathered them all at the mountain and God revealed himself in a dreadful way, the people freaked out and they said, no, we don't ever want to see him again. Never. Okay, he's our God, but we don't want to see him. Moses, you go talk to him. And then you come back and tell us whatever he said, and we'll do whatever you say. We'll just trust you, but we never want to see him or hear his voice ever again. They were just too terrified, right? And then you see a similar response with David when the ark is found, that he's afraid to bring it in. But as he perceives the goodness of the Lord, as he experiences God's desire for our good, remember the Lord says, I have plans for your good. I have plans for your prosperity. Then he allows God to come close to him, and he indeed brings the ark into the city of David. Now this is really kind of fulfilled at the conception of Jesus. We see the forerunner of the ark, David, dancing with abandon before the Lord. And when Mary brings Jesus to John the Baptist in the womb of Elizabeth, the forerunner once again dances, leaps in the womb of Elizabeth before the presence of the one who is to fulfill that which God had promised, being carried in the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark, the new Ark of the Ark of the New Covenant, right? And so we see human history. I mean, look at as far back as the fall. Adam and Eve are hiding from God, right? And then the Israelites, they know about God. I mean, remember, they were in captivity for 400 years. They were prisoners in Egypt longer than they were Hebrews, sons of Abraham, right? So you got to know that they were more pagan than they were Jew or Hebrew, worshiping cats and lizards and stuff, right? And they come out of the land of Egypt. It's no wonder that after only 40 days of Moses being gone, that they revert to paganism. It's what they knew, right? They're desiring to worship that one God. So it's not paganism in the strict sense. They're not or idolatry in the strict sense that they're worshiping a false idol. They're trying to worship the one God who had revealed himself to them. But they're doing it really badly. And then when God does show up, they're so terrified because they don't know him. And all they can perceive as slaves is that when power is manifest, it's manifest for my destruction. I'm afraid of power. I'm afraid of one with authority because it's always been used to hurt me. Right? And God, over time, has to slowly reveal to people, no, I'm not going to hurt you. I love you. I made you. I desire you. I want you to be close to me. I actually like you. I would prefer for you to be in my company. Now, you have to do that a certain way, but I want you to be here with me. And it takes a long time for people to get to that point. And we see the culmination of that really kind of in this beautiful way I bring up John the Baptist and Jesus with with Elizabeth and Mary respectively, because we see the foreshadowing of that scene here with David bringing the Ark of the Covenant. Finally, he's joyful to see the Lord. He's excited to see him. He wants God to be close to him. He wants God to come into the city. He wants everybody to be able to worship him and to be able to see him and to be able to know his name and hear his voice. Right? And God is so delighted in that we see the fulfillment of this in his Son. He sends his Son so that people can see his face, people can hear his voice, people will be delighted to see him. And John is the first expression of that. In this case, it's really the only case I can imagine John being a type of, or David being a type of John instead of Jesus. But in this case, we see John fulfilling the role of David, the fallen human component of this scene, and Jesus being the covenant contained within the ark, right? And it's just such a beautiful thing that God has so slowly, so tenderly, and patiently, loving us as much as he does, was so patient to reveal himself to us in a way that he could really bring himself into our heart, or to bring us into his heart, that it took so long as the advent of the Christ. It took so long as to really be able to say, Emmanuel, God's actually really with us in the person of Jesus. And that patience that God exhibits is really the same fortitude, it's the same endurance, that when we have that experience of God, when we know really who he is, when we've really lived the love that when we've lived the love for God that God has for us, we can then maybe begin to understand the fortitude that martyrs like Vincent had, to be able to be starved and racked and then barbecued over a gridiron. And you think to yourself, man, I could never do that. And I don't think I could ever do that. But St. Augustine writes a homily on Saint Vincent, and he says, of course it's not his power. It's not his human power that did that. It was the indwelling of God, whom he loved so much, that gave him the endurance and the fortitude to undergo those tortures. To be able to be martyred is nothing more than, the translation of the Greek word, to be a witness of one you love. What wouldn't you do for the one you love the most? And so the amazement of the spectators watching Vincent's torture, that he was so placid and serene, that he was even able to joke and jest despite his tortures, is a mystery. It's so bewildering to the world, but to a Christian it makes perfect sense. God was so intimately united to him, and he with God. And he, in the midst of his tortures, his soul was dancing like John the Baptist and like King David before the presence of the promise which he saw, hoped for, and ultimately, through the shedding of his blood, obtained. Would that we were so lucky.